Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you. You're tuned into the community briefing. Today is October 28th, 2021, and we are glad you are here. Today, our guest speaker is City Attorney Mike Feuer, and he will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, we will have some announcements and some administrative things to cover with you. My name is Gregory Sneed, and I have a company, Lifesaver Financial Services. I specialize in helping my clients keep more of the money that they make. I do that in financial coaching, financial literacy, and also offer life insurance and long-term care. I believe that when you feel better about your money, you feel better about your life. If you would like to feel better about your money, I will put some information in the chat and look forward to hearing from you. And now, it's my pleasure to welcome the queen of the community briefing, Ms. Crystal Mitchell.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you. Glad you guys are all here. We should have a great interview today with a City Attorney, Mike Feuer, who's a candidate for the Los Angeles mayor. So pleased to have you. My name is Crystal Mitchell. I'm the co-director of Recycling Black Dollars, as well as I manage and operate my own business, Mitchell Business Solutions. I have a podcast called The Business Zone with Crystal and Gilbert. So check that out every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. We go live on Facebook and YouTube. And I have another show called Conversations on the Patio, where we talk about everything that has to do with retiring, which hopefully is on everyone's bucket list, to retire with money and to be able to take care of yourselves. So this platform is here for all of us. It's not just here for the partners, my partners, Stephen and Greg and Robin. Is here for us. It's a platform for us to network, and it's a platform for our leaders to come and our stakeholders in our community to introduce them to us, and also for us to be introduced to them. So we have accessibility to them. So we want to thank you guys for coming. Please continue to show up every Thursday at 11 a.m. and tell a friend. And we're glad to have you. So we're still waiting for our guests. Stephen, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Turner. I'm the managing principal of the Slayton Group. We're a risk management and insurance firm specializing in workers' comp, general liability, small group insurance. But one of the things I'm most proud of is my association with the Black Business Association, as we celebrate 51 years of being in business. This is part of our mayoral forum. We're kicking off with Mike Feuer, who will be joining us shortly. Also, we're fortunate to have as our co-moderator, Bobby Grace. And Bobby, and then our special speakers here. Without that, let me kick it back over to Greg for the introduction.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome, Mike. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for joining us. You're just in time for your grand introduction.
Great. Looking forward to it.
All right. So Michael Nelson Feuer, also known as Mike Feuer, is a native of the Los Angeles area. And I'm going to go in reverse order. He graduated from San Bernardino High School. He then attended school that we've heard of, Harvard University, both as a bachelor's, and he also got his JD degree from Harvard. Somebody doing a whoop whoop there, Bianca.
I saw that.
Yeah. He also worked at the Harvard Law School Visiting Committee. He also spent some time in law practice and helping a number of organizations to provide legal services to the needy of all faiths. He joined the Los Angeles City Council in 1994 and served there until 2001. And he chaired the Budget and Finance Committee, wrote a bunch of reform measures, and made some friends, maybe a few enemies, or a couple people come after you. He then left and went to the California State Assembly and served there from 2006 to 2012. And also was able to put together some good legislative benefits for the state and our community. And since 2013, he has been the Los Angeles City Attorney. He started in 2013. He was reelected in 2017 without opposition. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
And he has been involved in a lot of programs. And he has announced his candidacy for the Los Angeles mayoral election that will be held next year in 2022. He's won numerous awards, too many for me to elaborate on. He has been married and has a family. He's been married for 36 years. Congratulations, Mike. And he has 2 children. My pleasure to introduce you and have us join Mike Feuer.
Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it very much. So what I'd like to do, for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to share a little tiny bit more about my background and what I stand for and what I intend to do as mayor, throwing in a little bit about my prior work, including my work as city attorney. But the meat of this is to have a conversation. So I'm looking forward to being able to engage you on anything that you'd like to talk about. And I'll try to generate as many woohoo moments as we possibly can in the next hour. So let me dive in. We know that the city is confronting many crises all at once, probably never seen so many emergencies converge. We have the health crisis the pandemic keeps causing. We have its impact on the economy, especially small business. We have the homelessness emergency, an affordable housing crisis, urgent calls for reform and equity. We have demands for reform of the police department, and crime is going up in many neighborhoods all at once. And the next mayor is going to be facing unprecedented challenges. And I always get asked in every meeting I attend, why on earth would you want to pursue that when everything is so tough right now? And I'm going to give you a little insight into who I am as a person, because the answer is these are the times when we define who we are, right? We don't just do the easy stuff. What matters most is the hard stuff. We're not going to be spectators. We're going to step in. And I come to all my work through that lens. Like all of us, I'm sure on this in this meeting, I come from a family that has endured great hardship and taught me about resilience and idealism and standing up for what one believes. Give some example. My father was a prisoner of war to the Nazis in World War II, barely survived that experience, became an educator in public schools, told me that he decided when he lived through that he would do what matters most, and that was kids. And he clearly conveyed to me that I should, in my life, define what I do, not by how much money I make, but how much I matter to other people. I've been also, I'm sorry, I got distracted by a work call I just got. My mom was born in Boyle Heights, taught us about social justice in my house because she made us very clearly remember what it was like for her when all her Japanese American friends were suddenly gone. My mom was a little kid when World War II broke out. Recall that we interned her neighbors in camps because we were afraid of Japanese Americans. And she made very clear to us that you got to stand up for people, especially when the chips are down. I got other stories like that too, but I just want to give you a lens into not just what I've done, but what matters to me. And what matters to me is to bring values to my work and not to speak in platitudes, but to accomplish big things. And I've tried to do that. As was mentioned, one of my earliest jobs was to direct Beth Sedek Legal Services. It means House of Justice, doing free legal work for tens of thousands of the most vulnerable people in LA. Seniors, people with disabilities who were losing their house or their apartment or their healthcare, didn't have any money, and they needed a lawyer. And we stood up for them. I ran that organization for 8 years. We helped 50,000 people. And the legal newspaper said I turned into a national success story. I ran for the city council, was supposed to get creamed because I ran against very famous people, but I won. And on the council, it is true, as Greg said, that I ruffled some feathers early on. There was a front page story in the Times that said fewer causes furor on city council floor. And the story was about this, that I was new in a council where term limits hadn't taken effect yet. So I had colleagues who had served for 20 or 30 years, and they were not interested in a new colleague who was taking action. They thought I should be seen and not heard. And I said, my obligation is to change the world and to shake up the status quo and to do things better. And I was able to enact a whole array of very important laws, everything from most important laws on gun violence to creating our 311 system. I was charged with chairing the Budget and Finance Committee, and that's how you express what matters most in the city. And I am very proud of my work in that role. And I did other reforms too, like ethics reforms and business tax reform. For example, I wrote the law that said if you're a new business starting in Los Angeles, you don't have to pay business tax in your first riskiest year. I then went on to the state legislature. I was the majority leader for policy in the California Assembly and chaired the Judiciary Committee in the midst of the Great Recession. Schwarzenegger was governor. We had to make some really tough decisions about what we would cut because the state had to survive and people's lives were on the line. And yet I was able to write consequential laws, assuring, for example, that kids with pre-existing conditions could get health insurance before Obamacare. Writing a law that authorized Measure R, $35 billion for public transit here in Los Angeles. Working with Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General as a joint author of the Homeowners Bill of Rights. A number of key measures. And again, for your purposes as business leaders, I was also asked by the Speaker to co-lead the effort in the state legislature to get capital to small businesses, starved for resources in the recession. Then I ran for this job, city attorney. And I will tell you that this job is among the most demanding that I've ever faced, because one has to grapple with everything from homelessness to the pandemic, to vaccine requirements, to airport noise, to police reform, discrimination in the fire department, a huge array of issues in this office. And I'm very proud of the fact that although I inherited an office that was not in good shape, within 4 years, our office was the only city attorney's office ever in the history of the country to get the American Bar Association's top award for a public sector law firm. And I've tried to lead on everything from consumer protection so that businesses that play by the rules aren't grappling with competing with those who don't. That Wells Fargo case, for example, that changed banking forever, that's our case. To environmental justice issues, to criminal justice reform, to just a huge array of key matters on the ground in our neighborhoods. I created a number of neighborhood-based programs to help lift our businesses and our schools in Los Angeles. And I'm running for mayor. And I'm running for mayor to tackle the stuff that matters the most, not the easy stuff. And we're going to talk, I'm sure, today about some of those issues: homelessness, affordable housing, public safety, economic recovery. Let me dive into just a couple of those, and then we'll have the Q&A. That's the best part of these kinds of conversations. So you will see that I am not interested in speaking in generalities. We've had enough of that. Slogans don't get things done. So my first day as mayor, I declare a state of emergency on homelessness. That gives the mayor additional executive authority, and it also galvanizes the public. I create a leader in City Hall to consolidate all the executive authority that the mayor's office has, and there's a lot of it, to contend with homelessness. I wrote a piece to the LA Times 4 years ago that was very controversial in City Hall, and the consequence of a lot of frustration by me. The piece said, if we had a big earthquake, we'd have a FEMA field general here on the scene, knocking heads, in charge of recovery. There'd be time frames and measures of success, and we have a natural disaster of that, a disaster of that magnitude. It's homelessness, but there's nobody in charge. And it wasn't that there weren't people in City Hall actively working on the issue, but you can't have authority that's diffused among many, many people with no one being accountable for what's happening. And that's what we've got, and I will change that. I'm going to create a strike team in City Hall to expedite the pace at which we cite and approve homeless and affordable housing, and hold general managers accountable for cutting that time. If they don't, they're not going to keep their jobs. I'm going to work with the private sector to build private equity funded permanent supportive housing. and address the urgent crisis on our streets by changing how we engage people experiencing homelessness, because we should be able to offer people a place to be and services, but at the same time say our public spaces need to be safe and accessible for everyone. We've offered you an opportunity to change this, and you can't stay here in front of this business on this sidewalk because our public space has got to be for everybody. I'm going to focus on homelessness, on mental health, on prevention. We'll talk about those issues. When it comes to economic recovery, some of you might know, I held a series of virtual town halls in the wake of the pandemic with small business owners, asking, what do you want from the city? What do you need from the city? And in each of these conversations, someone said, you're the first person to ask us. So as mayor, in addition to steps I've taken before, like I've said, changing small business tax for small businesses, I'm going to have a deputy mayor who is focused on small business recovery. I'm going to have an economic development cabinet that meets throughout the city and talks to leaders in communities about what you need for everything from mentorship opportunities to learning best practices from each other to cutting through red tape. When I was a city council member, I used to say to small businesses, you don't need a lobbyist in my district. I'll be an advocate for you in City Hall. So those are just the beginnings of steps I want to take because, again, we have an array of challenges our small business community faces. When I was asking folks, what do you need the most? Among the things that was most clear is the city's rules weren't being made clear to folks. That needs to change too. On public safety, I have called for investing in our police force. We have to reimagine what public safety looks like in terms of divesting from the department, interactions with people who are confronting mental health issues on the street, for example. By the same token, I'm a strong believer that we should be investing in a well-trained and substantial police force where training, for example, de-escalates violent confrontation and uses of force, where we elevate community safety partnerships like I've seen in the experiment that's underway in South Los Angeles, where officers are embedded in neighborhoods for 5 years, so they earn trust and respect. In places like Nickerson Gardens, where formerly there was a complete lack of that. And yet when I've been there, I've seen very tender relationships between officers and little kids. Very important. Some people have said we don't need social workers with guns. I couldn't disagree more. Our police force needs to be sensitized to the needs of the neighborhoods it serves. And unfortunately, our neighborhoods are dangerous in many cases, and officers need to be prepared to handle that. I'm going to pause, actually. Greg, I think, I've spoken for about maybe 12, 15 minutes. I'm happy to speak more, but I think it's really important that I listen to what participants on this call care about the most and answer your questions most directly. I'm happy to talk more if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm interested in hearing what people have to say, because I think it's really important that we are direct with each other. And I really hope that through this conversation, I can convey important information and ideally earn your support as I strive to be the next mayor.
Mike, what would you say are the top 5 goals or problems that the city of Los Angeles is dealing with that if you're elected mayor, you would want to tackle?
Well, as I said, homelessness, affordable housing, economic recovery and job creation, and public safety. Those are the key things. There are other issues that are really important. Having a sustainable city, my views of what quality public education should be like. For example, I've spent a great deal of my career focused on education equity issues. My kids are public school kids. There is great inequity in the city when it comes to public education. Transportation, a huge issue. There are a number of other issues, but the ones I mentioned are the top ones.
Next is how do we balance the investment that corporate entities are making in single family homes? They're buying up, homes in mass, overpaying, paying cash, and making it extremely difficult for families to get their first home.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. And I'm actually interested in some of your ideas about that, because making home ownership affordable is, let me put it this way. There are, as you know, there are huge gaps when it comes to wealth among different people based largely on issues of race and class. Intergenerational wealth is largely the product of being able to afford a home. in a world where home prices escalate so much. I served on the city council with Rita Walters. You know, Rita would talk to me about what it felt like when she was refused a home in the San Fernando Valley altogether. So as far as mayor, I need to be very cognizant of how those disparities have affected people for generations in Los Angeles. And, you know, finding a way with limited capital that the city has to offer to enhance home ownership opportunities for people who haven't had them is a real challenge. And you'll see me working across jurisdictional lines with the private sector, the state, and HUD to try to find supplemental resources to bring to bear to create home ownership opportunities. But let me say before I go on, I'm interested in views that people on this call have about concretely how to make that happen. Because one can talk about, you know, bridge loans, for example, but that only goes so far. People have to be able to afford a down payment. I was giving some remarks the other day in South LA at a church adjacent to which was a 2-bedroom house, very nondescript house. It was in a location, sorry. It's in a location where jets are flying into LAX low, so it's noisy there. And the house next to the church was $500,000. You know, that's where we are in our city. Access to that house can be really hard for people. What do folks in this call think about what a mayor should do about that? Anybody have some specific thoughts about that?
Bobby, you want to step in?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing today? Thank you for your introductory comments. I've known you for a while, and I know you to be an honorable and a forthright public servant who's always been accessible when asked. And today we're going to try to direct some questions to you from the chat. And then also, I think myself and the co-moderator may ask you some follow-up questions based on that. One of the questions that came up in the chat is kind of dovetailing on the homelessness issue. And there's a number of questions that the person asked. So I'm going to try to synthesize it into one. You talked about the difficulties in trying to help, you know, first-time buyers. Have there been any plans when you are on the city council or when you become mayor, if you become mayor, to try to keep people in their homes as a way of preventing homelessness, particularly when an infusion of, as you said, that the city has limited capital, but it may be cost advantageous to everyone to help people who may need limited resources just to keep them in their homes and not contribute to the homeless problem. Is that something that you would be interested in as mayor?
Of course, it's a great question, Bobby, I have to say. And the answer to this is if you go to my website, you will see I address the issue of prevention, because we can't continue as we have been. As you probably know, while we've been housing more people than ever before who are experiencing homelessness, more people have fallen into homelessness at the same time. So we're losing ground. So if you don't even care about being humane to other people from a cost benefit standpoint, it makes sense to keep people housed as opposed to letting them fall into homelessness. So 2 basic approaches. One is I will lead an effort to create a robust emergency fund that assures that tenants on the precipice of losing their tenancies have a little bridge moment to remain in their houses. You might know that there are experiments in Chicago and places like that with such an emergency fund. And second, I used to be a lawyer who advocated for tenants who were being unlawfully evicted. We have to be sure that there is a robust opportunity for tenants on the verge of eviction for reasons that are not their fault to have lawyers representing them. Because we know that lawyers, when tenants have lawyers, they usually win, and when they don't, they always lose, always lose. So those are the 2 components I think that are most important. There's a third, though, that I want to add to. There's a group called that's doing economic development and advised the county of Los Angeles and said, you know, homelessness is also a function of people not having access to good jobs. And we need to be careful about only thinking about homelessness through the lens of preventing homelessness through the lens of keeping someone financially there. Hold on. Sorry. What we need to do is also work on economic development strategies that assure that people are employed. And I have views about how we can create pilot projects to do that. And to give you a sense of being creative, as city attorney, we had a case when I was first elected that had been in the works for a long time. A bunch of gang members sued the city over the allegation that the city had unconstitutionally dealt with gang injunctions. And when I became city attorney, I saw the court rulings that had already been issued in that case. They were very negative to the city. I thought this is going to just involve big payouts. I called the lawyers for the plaintiffs and proposed an alternative, which was the creation of a job preparedness readiness program and an apprenticeship program where their clients could get first dibs, so that we're taking people who have been gangbanging and offering them the opportunity to be productive by getting basic training in how to get ready for a job and apprenticeships once they were ready, so they could do things like work on a hybrid engine. So that gives you a sense of how I like to approach things. That case would ordinarily have been settled for money. Instead, we settled for the creation of a program that will change people's lives and make folks productive. Thanks for the question.
Mike, there's a bunch of questions around homelessness. And so I'm going to try to synthesize all of them, and then I'm going to pivot to some more business related questions.
Sure.
So one of the questions is that on the point of affordable housing, can the city come up with a program that would help to lower rents for people who are renting, obviously, and then also to increase salary that folks are getting within the city so that people could afford market rates. So there's been a big debate about minimum wage, and the city has from time to time pushed corporations that are headquartered here in the city to try to raise the salaries of the employees that work for him, the larger corporations. But what can the city do more directly to lower rents and also to increase salaries for working people?
So the city is not going to be in a position on a large scale to lower rents. We won't have the money to do that. What the city needs to do is expand affordable housing opportunities in Los Angeles. There have been thousands and thousands of units, 20,000 downtown, for example, that have come online with no affordability requirement at all. And that doesn't make sense to me. And when it comes to creating affordable housing, we have underutilized corridors like think Washington and Venice or Oxnard or Victory, places like that, where we could be focusing more affordable housing by giving developers incentives to build there, but requiring the affordability to be part of it. We have a program in the city right now called our Transit-Oriented Corridor Program, for example, that we should put on steroids. I have ideas about how to expand that program, make it more worthwhile so we have more affordable housing supply, but because more supply will at some point help to lower costs. But I also think that when it comes to keeping tenants in their units, a couple things. First, we have what's called rent stabilization in Los Angeles, which allows rents to go up annually by a small amount, but newer units aren't subject to rent stabilization in the city. And when a unit is vacated, the price can go up to almost any level. So how do we grapple with that here in the city? We do have some experiments underway for people at very low income levels to see if giving them an amount of money every month could make a difference in keeping them housed. For example, you might have seen just this week, the council started its universal basic income experiment. You guys, I don't know if everybody knows what UBI is, but basically it's a program where the government just gives, in this case, $1,000 a month to families to test whether, with no strings attached, the infusion of money allows them to stay housed and to enable them to keep sort of food on the table and so on. I'm very interested in experiments like that, but those will have to be more than just city-specific programs because the amount of money involved is so great. This is where having the ability to work across jurisdictional lines is so important. A lot of the problems we confront are state, local, and federal issues, And you're going to see me continue to work across those lines to get things done.
Okay, we're going to pivot a little bit to talk more about directly about business and business opportunities in Los Angeles. One of the questions in the chat was, what can the mayor do to attract business to locate to Los Angeles, particularly major corporations to come back to the Los Angeles area and make their headquarters here. We've seen so many of the larger corporations leave Los Angeles and leave California for other states. What can a mayor do to prevent that and to attract new business?
Great question. So just as I said that I have worked with small businesses during the pandemic and certainly prior to that time to address their needs, I also met recently with leaders at the Chamber of Commerce to ask them what they thought the answer was to that very question. And it was interesting. 20 years ago, might have heard you need to change these regulations, these rules are too strict and so on. What I heard was, you got to have a city that works. You got to have a city. I just met this week with a developer downtown who told me about a company that pulled the plug on hundreds of millions of dollars investment in LA after seeing the homelessness issue downtown. So what does a mayor do? A mayor grapples with homelessness in the ways I began to describe, including, for the first time that I know of, having goals, concrete goals for how we diminish street homelessness every year, where the public holds the mayor accountable for that. I heard from these leaders about homelessness. I heard about transportation, where I've been deeply involved. I heard about the public education system. And one thing I would do as the mayor on public education, by the way, I was talking to one of the technological leaders in the country about this, the guy who founded Snapchat here in Los Angeles, who said to me, the public schools train kids that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and they train kids to work independently. In my business, many emerging technological businesses, I need people who don't even know what the problem is, let alone that there's a concrete answer to it. And I need people who work as a team, not in isolation from each other. So I'm going to have an education innovation officer in my office as mayor. And one thing we're going to do is to work with the private sector to identify the jobs of the future likely to come to Los Angeles. And then I will work with community colleges and others in the school district to create curricula that assure a business siting in Los Angeles will have well-trained workers, because we can anticipate in advance what their goals are and have a curriculum that ties to that. I want to be sure that that middle school student, that 6th or 7th grader, looking ahead, can say, you know what, if I stay in school, here's a concrete opportunity I'll have, as opposed to wondering now whether that's true. So there's a whole array of things the mayor needs to do to make the city run effectively. I mean, in this campaign, even things like this were brought up to me. People said the city's filthy. Doesn't look like a place you'd want to cite. In this campaign, I have said that I will create 1 million more hours a year of street cleanup and beautification efforts. And we can do it. I'd identified a funding source to do it and so on. The mayor has to have a city where homelessness is not the disgrace that it is, where the streets are clean, where the city is safe. And I've offered a number of proposals about safety, and where businesses feel as though there is a welcoming environment in City Hall. I have heard for years the line that we're going to give concierge services to businesses seeking to site in the city. But those are just empty words. And I mentioned earlier the steps I will take to change that. Thanks, Bob.
Michael, there is, Mike, the city does a lot of business procurement contracts with large corporations, small business. We're one of the major metropolises in the country, and really the nation. And so we do a lot of business, which has outside contracts outside of the city. What can the mayor do to improve procurement opportunities for Black residents and not running afoul of Prop 209? Can you work to increase opportunities for small business, other folks, Black business owners who are operating in certain zip codes? I mean, what can we do to increase opportunities, business opportunities for contracting with the city of Los Angeles?
Yeah, so for the first thing, by the way, on that point is, I'm going to create a task force to tell me just that. What concrete steps we need to take, because of procurement, every time I talk to small business folks, especially from communities of color, I hear the same thing. I hear that the process is opaque. I hear it's hard for us to get through it. And I hear that we're not competing successfully for it, and it's not right. So what I will do is assure that we not only get that diagnosis about the impediments in the process, but also, the city can do a much better job of reaching out to the small businesses, to apprise them of opportunities, and to create mentorship opportunities for folks who might be interested in contracting, so they're prepared to compete effectively in that process. Now, I'll tell you one thing that I would like to have done that I can't. When the voters of the state recently rejected the attempt to overturn 209, that was a major impediment, because I wanted to change the city's charter consistent with that, so that the city's charter would enable the kind of outreach that you're talking about. And there are some inhibitions on that. I know there are right now. So we have to find ways to work around that problem. And I do think that there are some creative ways we can identify. I've talked about some of them to do that. So, when it comes to that competition, a lot of times I think the small business community, local businesses the conditions for success don't exist because they haven't competed successfully before. And we need to be offering opportunities, including seminars and so on, that the city could offer, for how you can be effective in this process, so we create the conditions for success.
Thank you, Mike. You talked a little bit about schools. Antonio Villaraigosa, when he was mayor, he made a big push to try to use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to create or to improve the schools. And in fact, he very publicly identified schools that he was going to mentor, make charter schools, things of that nature, but got bogged down and became kind of a quagmire. What really can a mayor do to improve the schools when it's really not in your jurisdictional area, and maybe not, frankly, not your expertise?
Well, for what it's worth, it actually is in my wheelhouse to a degree. Let me tell you a little bit about my approach to schools throughout my career, and then talk about what the mayor can do. So because my father was a public school teacher and principal and volunteer for 60 years, and because my kids are both LAUSD kids, K through 12 kids, I've had a very personal stake in public education here for a long time. And you saw that reflected in my work as a city council member. For example, on the city council in the 90s, I created a program called Read LA. I did that because there were kids, especially from monolingual Spanish-speaking households, who were behind when it comes to reading. So to give you a sense, completely beyond the scope of the city councilman's authority, I reached out to the leaders of the community college and state college system, LAUSD, and the library system here, and created this program where we infused teachers in training into schools that I just described to change the student-teacher ratio K through 2 from 20-to-1 to 5-to-1. So there could be more intimate opportunities for kids to become literate. And that program lasted after I left the city council. It was an important thing to do. Between my work on the council and my work in the assembly, I was in private practice at a law firm called Morrison and Forster. And I won the Education Advocacy Award from the ACLU from my work to resolve the biggest education equity case in the last generation in California. The basic claim was that poor kids, mostly kids of color, were getting the least experienced teachers, the crummiest facilities, and no books. And it was a huge case. I was in the governor's office where we resolved that case for about $1 billion, working with the governor then. I was surprised that the Schwarzenegger administration were receptive to that, but they were, because we were so compelling in our work. And I worked very closely with the schools in other ways. For example, after the Parkland tragedy, where at Marshalltown and Douglas, so many kids were gunned down, I reached out to the superintendent and I said, look, I want to create a school safety panel here to elevate school safety here in Los Angeles and protect our kids. And I have no jurisdiction there. I created this panel, experts from around the state. We conducted hearings throughout Los Angeles. Hundreds of people came. And I have attended multiple school board meetings because we prepared 33 specific recommendations. And I go to the school board and say, enact this, enact that. So I got a lot going on with the school district and with public schools generally. I mentioned earlier that I would create an education innovation officer in my administration to work with the school district. And I am open to much more deep collaborations with the schools because I do know a lot about what happens at the schools and I know that what the future of the city is contingent on that. So I mentioned earlier, just to recapitulate for a second, I mentioned earlier that I want to work with the schools so that the curricula in public schools and community college, but public schools as well, are tied to the jobs of the future so that kids are being trained in aspects of careers that they can inherit as soon as they graduate. In entertainment, health sciences, a green economy, all these areas. So a lot to do, Bobby. I'm not sure I want to take over a segment of schools, but you're going to see me deeply engaged on these issues because no city can survive unless public education works.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it to Crystal, who's going to interject some questions here.
Thank you, Bobby. Mike, some questions. When I look around the city and I see Culver City and Santa Monica and Inglewood, I see them embracing these amazing changes in their community, and everyone in their community is inclusive. But I don't see that in the Crenshaw district. What I see in the Crenshaw district is we're allowed to become a devastated looking community. And then it allows for other people to come in and think that they need to interject their help in order to help us, but then we're excluded from that. How do we change that so the Crenshaw district represents the people that live in the Crenshaw district without displacing them within the community that they've grown up and they absolutely love?
Yeah. I'm well aware of that issue. It's a tough issue in Crenshaw. It's a tough issue in Boyle Heights. It's an issue in many different communities where the longtime residents of the area who created an identity there may not be able to afford to be there anymore. And it's a tough challenge. I will say there are a few answers that we might explore. For example, I'm a supporter of what are called community land trusts, where we identify parcels of land and we help community-based organizations consolidate those parcels so that they can remain affordable in the neighborhood. That's one thing to do. I would like to ask, when I'm mayor, I'm going to go to Crenshaw, for example, and convene a town hall and discuss with specificity steps that folks want to see the city take in this regard. Because look, there is a desire in every neighborhood for economic development. We ought to spur that. But preventing people from being displaced is another issue. There are some issues that we can't fully control. You saw a column in the Times yesterday, the day before, that was saying, to people in the Crenshaw in the Black community of Los Angeles, don't sell your house. Because if you sell your house, you're eliminating that intergenerational wealth transfer, and you're going to have some other folks come in and gentrify the neighborhood. Those are things the city can't control, but the city can do things like community land trusts and create incentives for businesses in a neighborhood to remain. I might say, for example, in addition to the various zones that have been created over time, opportunity zones, enterprise zones, and so on, I might try to find some ways for those zones, working with the federal government, to enhance opportunities specifically for people who are already in the neighborhood, as opposed to zones creating opportunities for people from outside the neighborhood to come in. And there's one more thing. When I was on the city council in the wake of the civil unrest in the 1990s, there was a program called Rebuild LA that was designed to infuse lots of capital into communities, including Crenshaw. Grocery stores were built, for example, things like that. But it wasn't that successful because it was a top-down enterprise. You're going to see me as mayor reach out to the business community and talk about partnerships that enable that to be a ground-up infusion of resources into neighborhoods, where communities where the resources are going have a stake in how they're used. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. That helps a lot. There is a question here. Let me get to it from Eric. Okay. How are you opposing to help small mom and pop landlords retain ownership? The city's existing policies hurt small landlords and favor corporate owners. For example, the SCEP fee increases, trash pickup, earthquake retrofitness.
Okay, so for what it's worth, I know that the lion's share of the apartments in the city are in fact those mom and pops. And to give you an example of how I operate, when the pandemic first happened, more than like a year and a half ago, I called Maxine Waters because Maxine chairs the committee that oversees housing. And I said, you know, the pandemic is not the fault of the tenant who lost her job, but it's also not the fault of the landlord who needs to exist and may need that revenue for their mortgage or to put food on the table. And said to her, you know, we need to have like $150 billion from the federal government that goes from the feds to tenant to landlord. And the city can't print money by law, neither can the state, but the feds can. I don't want to claim credit for this in any way, but that became what the federal government did. There are big problems with how that money has been administered, which has made it very difficult for the mom and pop landlord. But that's my approach, though, is to say, let's not pit people against each other. Let's find a way that everybody benefits from in the context of a common problem. Now, can the earthquake renovation program change? Maybe there may be some additional incentives to provide to landlords. Those of you who don't know what we're talking about, a lot of these apartments are soft story apartments. So if you see those apartments that have like a room above a carport and a couple poles down there holding up the building, those are earthquake hazards for people who live there. And so the city has provided a program that says you have to retrofit your building and provided financing for that retrofitting. I can look at whether that financing program is sufficient or whether it needs to be bolstered. I don't know about another array of city programs that might help small mom and pops, but I certainly, as you can tell, understand the issue. I'd welcome further input.
All righty, Greg, throwing it back at you.
Mike, one last question and then we're going to wrap up here. What are your thoughts on there was some thoughts kicking around on the city council adding council members, which would in theory dilute power, but allow council members to focus more succinctly on smaller neighborhoods?
So actually, that's my idea. I proposed that in the course of the campaign, that we cut council districts in half. So as you might imagine, I support the idea, but here's why. Hold on, sorry. So I was a city council member. My council district was the size of Buffalo, New York, or Boise, Idaho. Just my district, right? And that's what we have now. I worked like a dog to make sure that everybody in my district was well represented, that I knew what was happening on their block. But it's a challenge. The district is too big. And government LA isn't working. And one reason it's not working is we have a relatively unaccountable city council in a situation where it's very hard for them to have that intimate knowledge of what's happening on people's blocks. You can, as a council member, shine on this neighborhood over here, knowing you don't need their support because you got other support over here. You got a huge district. That needs to change. So what I proposed is we cut the council districts in half. And when I was on the city council in the 90s, I proposed charter reform in the city council, and I was a supporter of reducing the size of council districts then, but that lost on the ballot. It lost because opponents, the special interests, who would prefer a smaller district, the special interest says it's going to cost too much money if you decrease the size of districts. So I proposed this time to avoid that problem, we cut the districts in half and cut the pay in half. So the council members would earn roughly what a state assemblyman makes. I think this is on the right path. And so, you know, other cities, Chicago, a little smaller than Los Angeles, has 50 members of what is its city council, not 15. This is not an issue that I think no one can dispute, that a smaller district means more responsive government. And we need that right now.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to wrap it up here. We have some guests where we're kind of scrambling for questions. And today, our apologies, we may not have been able to get to all questions. But we thank everyone for their input and their questions. Mike, we thank you for your coming here and sharing with us your ideas. Bobby, thank you for your moderation and helping us out today. So we'd love for you to come back perhaps in the future, and that would be great, because we didn't get a chance to get to everything. So that was fun. Definitely appreciate that. And it's good to see you. I think the last time I saw you was maybe a little over 2 years ago at church. I will say that unlike a lot of the politicians that only show up when they're running for election, Mike would come visit us at First AME Church just to come hang out and worship. And so we certainly appreciate that.
Well,
I'm
that's a
looking forward.
plus.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, well, there are two things about that, by the way. Maybe three things. So first of all, I came so much that, there's always a moment in every church's service where someone says, "Will the visitors please stand up?" And, I'm obviously not a member of Fame or Ward or other churches where I've gone. I kind of haltingly debated standing up, like 5 or 6 years ago. And some congressmen behind me pretty harshly whispered, "Do not stand up. You are not a visitor here."
That was me.
Really, that felt really good, actually. So there's that. But the other thing is, I know enough not to come and leave. Right, the folks who are there when you don't asking for anything and you stay the whole time. That's the way the world should work, right?
That's
so
exactly.
And show up on time.
Yeah, exactly. And now the pandemic ideally will allow us to be worshiping again, and you'll see me back, and you'll whisper again to me, which I'll appreciate a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's fantastic. That has always been a pet peeve of mine, especially when I was I grew up in First AME Church, and that always really just irked me. Politicians showing up just on election time, and then you never see them again, and that's always been a pet peeve of mine. So,
well, can I say something? Actually, but I know we're going to finish, but let me say something serious about that for a second. Back in the days that I was running Bethsedic, when Chip Murray was in charge at Fame, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I spent a lot of time at the church protecting the homes of grandparents that were being ripped off by scam artists. And again, been many times to the church, not during services, but in addition to services, to deal with issues like economic development. Or there was a board and care facility near Fame that was horrible, where the conditions were terrible for people, and trying to deal with that, and so on. It actually does matter a lot to me as I'm running for mayor, that I'm not the guy who just talks to folks when I need help, that we're here to lead each other, to lift each other up all the time, not just when I want to vote. And I hope that as we move forward together, and that we can think of a city that works that way all the time, that's unified by common purposes when no one's looking, not TV cameras. No one's looking, but we care. Then that's the kind of mayor I want to be. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys today. I really appreciate it a lot. Take care.
Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap up with a couple of comments. One is our correspondent today, Ms. Colette Moore, could not be with us, and so she did want us to share a new grant that has come up. It is called Comeback Check Grants. There's a link and information in the chat room. You can find it there, but the portal's open at noon on Tuesday, October 26th. Mayor Garcetti has allocated $25 million of the American Rescue Plan Act funds toward helping recovering small businesses. The program is set to award $5,000 to $5,000 businesses, and eligible use include employee payroll, rent, utilities, insurance, payment of outstanding business expenses incurred on or after March 3rd, 2021, and working capital to reopen and continue operating your businesses. For for-profit business only, and to qualify, businesses must be within the city boundaries and have a LA business tax registration certificate, a BTRC. To find out if your business is located in the city, there is a link in the chat that you can click on to find that out. And there are the first of the 3 application rounds open on October 26th and closes on November 2nd. So that's a very close, tight window, guys. So if you meet those qualifications, please respond to that ASAP. The other thing is, some of you may have been missing our other partner, Ms. Robin Billups. She's been ill, but she is actually on her way home today. So continue to pray for her, and we should be able to see her really soon. I was so happy to see her start responding on Facebook the other day. I almost cried. So please keep her in our prayers, and she will be strong. Robin is a major force in our city, and we want her to stay amongst us. So please, guys, do that. Let's see, anything else? Oh, I got a great news. One of my kids from Biz Camp, she awarded a $10,000 scholar, a $10,000 check, and she is now a national entrepreneur. She won the National Entrepreneur Youth Challenge for Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. I am so proud of her. She did a fantastic job, and last week she pitched. So you guys go to my Facebook page, you'll see her. Her name is Amila Charles, and she started a project. She launched a product called Curly Crowns. It's hair care for those with natural hair. Go over to her website, purchase her product, support all Black businesses, but especially support young people's Black businesses, because we're encouraging them to be the leaders of tomorrow and our business owners of tomorrow. So we need your support. And as the co-director of Recycling Black Dollars, all of us should be supporting each other. And as Muhammad Nazaruddin used to say, every chance you get, put a dollar in another Black hand. So with that, we want to thank you guys all for being here. Stephen, would you like out and let you know also this program is sponsored and supported by Recycling Black Dollars, as well as the the BBA, Black Business Association. We're here as a platform to make sure that we are working together. We can't expect people to help us if we're not willing to support and help each other. So with that, Stephen, you want to make an announcement? Where did he go?
Hello.
Oh, there you go. For who's coming to the show next week. I think we lost Stephen. So
Hello.
yes, Roger.
Oh, okay, yeah, the Man Cave. You can still register for the Man Cave. It's on November 12th. I put the website in there. We can go on the website, and it's free. Okay. There's a lot of great speakers. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it.
Can you provide a little bit more context around what the Man Cave is? What is that?
Okay, so the Man Cave, it's a part of the women's conference. Okay, and the Man Cave, it's where the men get together and they're talking about issues on health and wealth. And this time we have a social justice part of our committee that conference is going on as well. Police, working with the police in the community.
That's great, because that wasn't clear because it was part of the women's conference. So I wasn't sure if it was geared towards women or for men. So
no. Yeah, it's
sort of anti-misogyny conference.
Yeah, but it's just for men. It's just for men.
But
Yeah.
within the women's council.
Right.
All right, I like that. We need to do that. So next week, guys, we're hoping that we have Councilwoman Karen Bass on to talk about her
Stephen's
journey.
back.
I'm sorry, her journey. She's also a candidate for LA mayor, and so we want to make sure we hear everyone's voices in this space. So. With that, I don't think I have. Oh, yes, I do have one more announcement. You guys will have been receiving notifications. If you go to my Facebook page, all of my social media, the Los Angeles Black Business Expo is taking place on November 20th. We are honored to have Dr. George Frazier speaking. He's the president and founder of Power Network. We have Dr. Dennis Kimbrough speaking. We have Mike Roberts, who's a billionaire real estate mogul in Detroit. All of these amazing people are going to be speaking. So go over to the 21 LABBE, get your ticket. It is going to be absolutely awesome. If you're looking, if you like to represent your business there, we have booth opportunities there for you, and also looking for sponsorship. And we have some kids that are going to be doing some pitch competitions there as well. So with that, we want to close out today's show and thank you so much. We hope to see you guys next week, and pass the word and tell a friend and bring them back with you next week. And I hope you have enjoyed this. Thank you, Bobby, for your input today. And that was a great interview with Mike Feuer. So thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Greg. And prayers up for Robin Billups. And we will see you guys next week.